Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories. And before I begin, tell me where you're watching from, because I love knowing which cities connect to these moments that stay with us for years. I remember that afternoon more clearly than most days in my life, standing in my quiet kitchen, staring at a cup of tea that had gone lukewarm, while my thoughts drifted somewhere else, when I heard a soft knock at the door, gentle, hesitant, as if the person behind it wasn't sure they should be there. When I opened it, I saw Daniel, my ex's son, older, now taller, carrying a look that said he'd been going through more than he was ready to admit. He asked if we could talk, his voice steady but lined with worry, and though I felt a flutter of something unfamiliar in my chest, I stepped aside and let him in without hesitation, because I had known him for years. First, as a quiet teenager who would sit on my couch with silent politeness, and now as a young man in his late 20s, standing before me like someone searching for a place to finally exhale. The air inside felt warmer when he stepped in, maybe because he carried a gentleness that filled a room without trying. He sat at the kitchen table, tapping his fingers lightly as if rehearsing words he hadn't quite formed yet, and even though he didn't like tea, he accepted. The cup I poured, which already told me something heavy, lived behind his silence. When he finally spoke, he admitted he didn't know who else to talk to, that he was confused about life, about choices, about how to handle people he genuinely cared about. And as he stared at the steam rising from his cup, I felt something shift inside me, not romantic, not inappropriate, but human, the feeling of someone trusting you with the parts of themselves they've kept hidden. He spoke quietly about work that drained him, friends who didn't understand him, and feeling stuck between who he used to be and who he was supposed to become. And when he said he didn't want to disappoint people he respected, his eyes finally met mine, and something sincere settled between us and forced, honest, steady. I told him truths I had learned the hard way. That moments of confusion don't mean we re-failing, they often mean we re-changing, and he listened in a way people rarely do anymore, as if every word mattered. When he left, he paused at the doorway, saying he hadn't realized how much he needed the conversation. And when he walked into the late afternoon sun, a quiet warmth bloomed in me, not excitement, not longing, just a gentle awareness that something meaningful had begun. The next morning carried an unusual anticipation, the kind you try to ignore but can't fully shake. And even as I went about my routine, I found myself thinking about the calm sincerity in his voice. Around noon, he messaged, asking if he could continue our talk, and something about the simplicity of the request held weight. When he arrived, he brought coffee, as if making up for accepting tea he didn't like. And after a long breath, he admitted he hadn't reached the real reason the day before. He talked about pressure and expectations, about feeling misunderstood and invisible. And when he finally said he trusted me more than most people in his life because I saw him for who he was, not who he pretended to be, Felt that same shift again, something quiet and deeply human. Our conversation drifted naturally, and for the first time in years, I found myself opening up to sharing small truths about moments when I had been lost and unsure, and he listened with an attentiveness that felt grounding. Hours passed unnoticed, and when he stood to leave, he hesitated again, asking if he could visit whenever he needed clarity, and I said yes before thinking, The next day passed quietly, but every time my phone buzzed, a small part of me hoped it was him. And late in the afternoon, it finally was. He said he realized something important and needed to talk. When he arrived, there was a new vulnerability in his expression. Thoughtful and unguarded, and he confessed that after thinking deeply, his mind kept circling back to our conversations because they made him feel grounded in a way he hadn't felt in years. He shared childhood memories he had never said aloud. Moments of feeling pressured or misunderstood, and the pauses between his words were filled with understanding rather than discomfort. When he said he didn't expect someone older to make him feel so understood, not judged, something warm settled inside me, not romance, not longing, just the recognition of a genuine connection forming quietly and naturally. We sat on the same side of the table this time without intending to, and our conversation carried a softness that felt steady and sincere. He talked about making decisions with more confidence, about wanting to shape a life that reflected who he truly was. And when he asked for my perspective, it wasn't for approval, it was because he valued the clarity he found in these talks. When he finally stood to leave, he looked at me with a calm steadiness and said he hoped our conversations wouldn't end because he felt he was becoming a better version of himself through them, and as I closed the door behind him, the house felt fuller somehow, as if our conversations had left a quiet glow in the air. Life surprises us when we think we've already lived through most of our defining moments, and sometimes the most meaningful connections appear unexpectedly gentle, steady, human. Whatever Daniel and I were building wasn't about age or history, but about presence, understanding, trust, and the quiet reminder that emotional connection can arrive at any stage of life and shape us in ways we never saw coming.